Imagine Europe in the early 1600s, a continent trembling under the weight of war, greed, and desperation. Armies march through the snow, cities smolder, and kings whisper of victory while their treasuries run dry. It's a world where silver is power, and power is slipping away. The year is 1621. The 30 Years' War is tearing the heart out of Europe. Every ruler needs more weapons, more soldiers, more gold. But when gold runs out, they turn to the one thing more dangerous than any army. They turn to money itself. This is the story of the Kipper and Wipper time, the clipping and culling time. A name that sounds almost harmless until you realize it marked one of history's first great financial meltdowns. A time when entire nations cheated their own people, when trust vanished overnight, and when coins, once symbols of stability, became instruments of chaos. The Holy Roman Empire was not one empire at all. It was hundreds of many kingdoms, duchies, city-states, bishoprics, each ruled by men who thought themselves masters of destiny. Each had the right to mint coins, to print their own version of value, and that's where the seeds of collapse were planted. At first, it was subtle. A few rulers quietly mixed cheaper metals, copper, tin, into their silver coins. The face value stayed the same, but the real value shrank. It was the oldest trick in the book. Create more coins from the same pile of silver and you've made money. But what they'd really made was an illusion. Soon the temptation spread like wildfire. Every ruler, every mint master, every ambitious prince joined the race. They melted the old coins, diluted them, stamped new faces on them, and sent them flooding into the markets. Overnight, Europe was drowning in bad money. Merchants began to notice. Coins that once gleamed with weight and promise now felt suspiciously light. Their ring on the table sounded dull. The people who had trusted their currency began to test it, biting the edges, scraping the surfaces, checking the color of the metal beneath the shine. And when they realized what had been done, panic followed. Prices soared. Food vanished from markets. A loaf of bread cost twice as much by sunrise. Soldiers demanded payment in pure silver, not in the new fake coins. And the rulers, the very ones who caused the crisis, blamed everyone else. They called the counterfeiters kippers and whippers, the clippers and scammers, as if this was just a criminal problem, not a government-made disaster. But the truth was clear. The empire was collapsing under its own lies. In just 2 years, trust in money, that invisible force that holds civilizations together, evaporated. Trade broke down. Markets closed. People turned to barter, to foreign coins, to anything that still held real value. The Holy Roman Empire's economy wasn't just unstable, it was broken. But here's the part most forget. This wasn't just an economic tragedy, it was psychological warfare. Ordinary citizens woke up to find their savings stolen, not by thieves in the night, but by the very rulers sworn to protect them. The illusion of value, the belief that money had meaning, was shattered. And when that illusion breaks, societies unravel. Because when people no longer trust their money, they no longer trust anything. Not their leaders, not their markets, not their future. But the story doesn't end there. What happened next would turn chaos into catastrophe and teach Europe a lesson it still hasn't learned. By 1622, Europe was spiraling into madness. The crisis that began with coins had turned into chaos. Across the Holy Roman Empire, silver vanished from circulation. In its place, people clutched light, hollow discs of copper, pretending to be money, a cruel joke cast in metal. The streets told the story. Merchants refused to sell their goods unless paid in trusted foreign currency. Dutch florins, Venetian ducats, anything but the empire's worthless coins. Markets grew silent. Trade slowed to a crawl. And when money stops moving, civilization follows. Armies, once loyal to their kings, began to crumble. Soldiers who were paid in fake coins simply took what they wanted instead. They looted, burned, and ransomed entire villages. Farmers refused to sell food for currency that bought nothing. Starvation spread. And still, the rulers didn't stop. They couldn't, because without money, their wars would end. The emperor's decree meant nothing now. Local princes had taken control of their mints, and the mint masters, private businessmen who profited from every coin they struck, became the new power brokers. They melted silver relics, church chalices, and heirlooms just to stay ahead. It was a gold rush in reverse, a feeding frenzy of destruction. Each coin was a lie stamped with royal authority. Each mint a factory of deceit. Rulers called it reform. Mint masters called it innovation. Ordinary people called it what it was: theft. The press of corruption was relentless. Coins grew thinner, lighter, faker. Villages that once rang with the sharp chime of real silver now echoed with dull, empty metal. And the people, powerless to stop it, began to lose something even more precious than money: faith. Faith that tomorrow would make sense. Faith that work would be rewarded. Faith that the rules of life still mattered. As trust evaporated, fear took its place. Prices doubled, tripled, then multiplied beyond reason. Bread cost a week's wages. Families hid their last good coins in the walls of their homes. Markets turned violent. Shopkeepers attacked for refusing payment. Soldiers bribed with silver spoons instead of pay. The empire's grand cities became war zones of desperation. And when the rulers realized the catastrophe they'd unleashed, they did what rulers always do. They blamed others. They accused merchants of hoarding, peasants of greed, and foreigners of sabotage. Pamphlets circulated blaming outsiders, witches, and conspirators for the crisis. In Saxony, rumors claimed that demons were devouring the silver itself. Anything to avoid the truth that it was their own hands turning wealth into dust. Meanwhile, the rich adapted. Nobles borrowed money in the fake coins and repaid their debts later in even cheaper ones. Their wealth survived, even grew, while workers starved. The poor suffered the inflation. The powerful turned it into profit. And here, the pattern of history revealed itself once again. Inflation isn't a number, it's a weapon. A quiet war waged by those who print money against those who earn it. By 1623, entire towns had collapsed. Soldiers deserted, farms were abandoned, trade routes fell silent. The great German states that once glimmered with silver wealth now rotted under copper lies. But just when it seemed the empire had hit bottom, something even more dangerous began to rise. The rulers decided to fix the problem, and their solution would change the history of money forever. By 1623, the Holy Roman Empire was starving. The fields were barren, the markets empty, and the coins in people's pockets were as worthless as the promises of the rulers who made them. Yet amidst this chaos, something remarkable was taking shape. The realization that money itself could no longer be trusted to the hands of many. In city after city, rulers scrambled to restore order. They banned the old debased coins, declared new currencies, and issued decrees promising stability. But each solution carried a cruel twist. Citizens were forced to exchange their worthless money for new coins, often taxed so heavily that they lost half their remaining wealth in the process. It was the first great reset, a reset not for the people, but for the powerful. Rulers claimed this was reform. But the truth was darker. The crisis had exposed a truth every government eventually learns. If you control the money, you control everything. The smaller mints, once symbols of local independence, were shut down. Private mint masters were jailed, executed, or quietly absorbed into royal service. The right to make money was stripped from towns and merchants and placed squarely in the hands of the crown. The birth of centralized monetary power had begun. It was, on the surface, a return to order, but beneath it, the seeds of a new kind of system were being planted, a system built on control, not trust. Imagine living in that moment. You're a blacksmith in Saxony. You've traded your last good coin for food, and now the government tells you your savings must be exchanged for new money, but you'll receive only half its worth. You protest, but soldiers stand guard. You comply or you starve. That's not reform. That's coercion wrapped in the language of stability. And yet people accepted it. Why? Because they were exhausted. The famine, the inflation, the endless uncertainty, it all wore them down. People didn't need justice anymore. They needed the illusion of safety. That's the silent moment when freedom gives way to control, not through war or conquest, but through fatigue. Over the next decades, this lesson became policy. Monarchs across Europe centralized their mints, outlawed private coinage, and declared that only the state could define value. The logic was simple. If chaos was born from too many rulers making money, then order would come from one. By the late 1600s, that idea evolved into something revolutionary: the birth of central banks. The English bank was established in 1694 and would become the model for a new kind of financial empire that ruled not through swords or soldiers, but through credit, interest, and trust enforced by law. The chaos of the Kipper and Wipper era had given birth to modern finance. But it also gave birth to something far more enduring: a myth. A myth that money could be controlled without corruption, that rulers could be trusted with the keys to value itself. A myth that still defines the system we live under today. Because what started as desperation in 1623 became doctrine, the belief that every crisis could be solved not by reforming greed, but by consolidating power. And history shows, once that power is centralized, it's never given back. 4 centuries later, the echoes of the Kipper and Wipper crisis still shape the world we live in. The coins may have vanished, replaced by glowing screens and digital numbers, but the pattern, that dangerous dance between power and illusion, remains the same. In the 1620s, people could feel inflation in their hands. Their coins grew lighter, their silver dulled. The lie was visible. Today, the lie hides in plain sight, in the silent devaluation of digital balances, in the slow bleed of purchasing power, in promises that tomorrow's currency will be worth the same when history says it never is. The rulers of old mixed copper into silver. The rulers of now mix debt into data. Back then, mint masters whispered in candlelit workshops. Now central bankers speak in polished boardrooms. The words have changed: stimulus, quantitative easing, monetary policy, but the effect is the same: the quiet theft of value, repackaged as progress. And the public? Still playing the same losing game. The poor earn in soft money that erodes every year. The rich hold assets that rise as currencies fall. Inflation, then as now, is not an accident. It's a strategy, a slow transfer of wealth from those who work to those who manipulate. The Kipper and Wipper crisis taught one lesson that humanity keeps forgetting. Money is not metal, paper, or code. It's belief. And once that belief breaks, no system, no empire, no government, no algorithm can hold it together. In 1623, a farmer in Saxony buried his last good coins in the earth, hoping one day his children might dig them up and find value again. In 2025, a worker in New York watches prices rise faster than his paycheck and wonders why his savings buy less each year. 400 years apart, but the story is the same. Different tools, same tragedy. Because every monetary collapse begins not with a bang, but with a whisper, a leader saying, "This time is different," but it never is. Every empire, every economy that believes it can outsmart trust eventually learns the truth. You can forge coins, you can print money, you can even digitize debt, but you cannot counterfeit confidence. And when confidence dies, money dies with it. The Kipper and Wipper crisis was not just a story of old Europe. It was a warning carved into history itself, a mirror held up to every generation that dares to believe it can create something from nothing. 4 centuries later, the names have changed: Saxony, the Holy Roman Empire, the Mint Masters, replaced by Wall Street, central banks, and digital currencies. But the cycle hasn't ended. It's only evolved. And when the next collapse comes, as it always does, remember this: it won't be sudden. It will be silent. Not in the streets, but in your savings account. Not with swords, but with spreadsheets. That's the legacy of the Kipper and Wipper crisis, the first great warning that money is only as strong as the truth behind it. And history has never forgiven a lie. If this story opened your eyes, remember, the past doesn't repeat, but it always rhymes. Like, share, and subscribe.